Fuzzy Lawgic number 3. I am moderator, host, many titles, Trevor, and this is the esteemed, I think it's this way, esteemed Gordon Firemark, and Elsie Escobar will be with us in a few moments. She is finishing up one of her many awesome obligations that she has going on in her world. This is Fuzzy Lawgic. Today we are talking about misrepresentation, clickbait, and deception, a carryover issue from last week that we felt was so important to get into for small businesses and creators like us. So we are back to talk about it more, and we are so excited for you to be here. Thank you, and welcome to Fuzzy Lawgic. Good morning, Gordon. How are you?
Good
Welcome
morning.
to Fuzzy Lawgic, sir.
It is great to be here. Hi, Trevor. This is another interesting, compelling, challenging topic we're going to be talking about today. So I'm excited to get into it. But let's first off just let our viewers know we've all been having a few little tech glitches today. So if things change, if things get weird, just bear with us. We're going to stick to it. We'll give you a good show. So
yeah. Thank you for saying that. We blame the weather, I think, is what we mutually agreed on.
That's
and
right.
And to everybody who's dealing with weather, on that note, we laugh about it because we're lucky, Gordon and I, to be in Southern California, some of the least weathered places in the whole country. So to those of you literally everywhere else, we're sending hugs and warm blankets and hopes of your power returning soon if it's off, because that's awful. And we wish you sun.
Well, you make it sound like we've got it going good here right now, but I don't know about you, but we got snow yesterday. Here in
you got snow in
area.
You did not.
Yeah, I live in Santa Clarita, the Valley, the north of LA, and we're at a little bit of an elevation. And just for about 5 minutes, we saw snowflakes coming down. They didn't stick or anything like that, but so it's cold and wet here. But,
wow, no,
nothing like what Bree's dealing with up in Minnesota.
No, we got down into the 50s in San Diego. We don't do snow here. San Diego County, of course, is huge. So some parts of San Diego County up in the hills will get some, but no, that's cool. Well, congratulations to see snow. I feel like that's a big deal for y'all up there. Where I'm
it's
from,
the third time since we've lived in this house that we've seen snow during the winter season. And, the kids get all excited. Are they going to cancel school? No, it's an eighth of an inch of snow that melts when it hits the ground. But it's a snow day.
I've heard about snow days, Dad. I want a snow day.
Right.
That is the
we'll
one
have an earthquake
payoff.
and they'll have days off of school.
Oh man, yeah, you just validated all of my family that wonders why I live here.
Right.
Shout out, by the way, to Meredith. I know she tunes in quite often, and she is back home, as I say, living in the cold weather up in the hills, probably snowed in like Bree. Let's dive in. I want to talk about clickbait as the easy, because we talked for today's episode. It is such a broad topic, so we want to start broad and a little bit on the lighter side, and we're going to narrow our way down into a more focused discussion about specific things, especially when we get into the legals of it. And one of the places we're going to wrap is with some current Supreme Court cases that Gordon is very nerding out on that he wants to talk about, and I'm so excited for him to share it. But it is some important stuff going on, so stick around so you can hear what's going on in Supreme Court later, because Supreme Court means biggest of the big, and it's going to definitely run downhill and impact us. That is what I'm told about it, so definitely stick around to hear about Section 203, 230. 230.
Now I got to go look up what is Section 203.
Yeah, so we'll be getting to that, but I wanted to start with clickbait because clickbait's kind of a fun place to peruse from a social standpoint and also from a money standpoint. We work in podcasting and with podcasters, and are always trying to beat the algorithm. And I wondered, from just like a day-to-day user standpoint, Gordon, without even getting too far into the weeds about like the legal parts of it, how do you feel as a user about like the concept of using the popular background and the popular facial? Like, I go to Mr. Beast and I see that Mr. Beast, every picture on his YouTube is like this. So that's what we do. As podcasters, we're like, let's be like that guy. Do you feel like that throws you off because then they all start to look the same in terms of just a clickbait perspective? Oh, we don't have volume, Gordon.
Sorry about that. I'd muted my mic so I could cough and clear my throat. Yeah, I use those techniques too. You know, on my YouTube channel, you'll see me going, you know, that kind of stuff. And there is some evidence if you look at the statistics on YouTube, that those kinds of thumbnails attract more clicks, more viewers. So that's what we're talking about, clickbait. What do you do as a creator to attract audience, to catch people's eye in that fraction of a second that you have while they're scrolling by or whatever, to, oh, what's that, you know, that kind of thing. So Mr. Beast does it, I do it, lots of other YouTubers do it. I try to be sort of true to the topic as far as I think that the facial expression, that's the eye catcher. People do this on other social media too, where they'll post a picture of a kitten to illustrate their question about, you know, trademark law or something like that. And it's just, well, kitten to get you to stop, right? And they'll be transparent. Oftentimes they'll be transparent about it. But really, it's, you know, you have to just be, well, that's it, transparent. You got to make sure that you are actually delivering value once the user clicks, and that's where clickbait really gets tricky. I would say more in email than anything else. We all get these emails where there's some crazy, compelling, sensational headline in the subject line, and then you open it up and it's, you know, hey, buy goji berry juice or something like that.
Yeah. Or like news titles. I noticed that that news titles are getting worse and worse. Hello, we have a spotlight star sighting. There is an Elsie Escobar in the house.
Elsie.
What up, Elsie? Happy Friday.
Hello. Happy Friday, Trevor and Gordon. Sorry I'm late.
Hello. No. I'm glad you could join us. Your busy schedule. That's awesome. So
that sure
we were just getting started on the subject of clickbait and
awesome.
talking about stuff. So we probably ought to sort of define the term clickbait. What do you guys consider clickbait?
For me, clickbait is basically everything. Like, I think that in the world we live in, it feels like everything is kind of clickbaity. And I think that's kind of the interesting part about that discussion. Is like the difference between a live shot and the best shot is sometimes like the fine line. But I would say more specifically for clickbait, for me, when I think of it, I think, Gordon, what you were saying, I think a lot of Fox News. Like, truthfully, the stories that Fox puts in there are very sensationalized, but they all are in the cable news industry. And I think sensationalizing it is maybe something I think of for the most common clickbait I get, but I also think about it in traditional business terms where it's bait and switch. So I was thinking a lot about that. Bait and switch is the old business term where you say that it's a quart, but it's actually a pint. You know, or one true example, we sold strawberries to people growing up, and there was this one market that we would take them to, and he would take his quart baskets and he would push up the corners of them so he could pull a couple off the top and make another quart. And it was, so he was telling you were buying a quart, that was the bait, and the switch was take it out, or all the rotten ones were on the bottom. To me, that's like,
yeah, that's a bait and switch. Yeah, it's deceptive. Absolutely.
How about you, Elsie? What do you think?
To me, it's when it hits the core of your nervous system in some way, shape, or form. Whether it makes you like it usually has a physical reaction to it. One of the things, in addition to what you mentioned, that one of the things that I've seen in the past have been those websites that, like, when you scroll at the bottom, they have these pictures of like, do you have this disease? And it's got like these giant warts on a hand or something. And you're like, what is that? And then so you kind of go, because that's grotesque, right? So, or it's something like somebody's mouth is really big. Have you seen what so-and-so has done with their face? And then their lips are big and you're like, oh my God, what is that? Right? So it's something either curious, like deep curiosity, something that's super scary, generally negative reactions. It's often not a positive spin on it, but it's something that has to do with a visceral feeling that it gives, and it's short and it's not very. That's to me what clickbait is. In headlines, images, videos, memes, anything that calls your attention and makes you have a physical reaction that tends to lean towards negativity.
Yeah, I just looked up when I asked the question. I said, "Well, nice grab." I looked up the Wikipedia definition of it, and it talks about text or thumbnail link. First of all, did you know there was a movie in 2018 titled Clickbait and a mini series on Netflix called Clickbait?
Oh, wow. Haven't watched it. I probably have watched it. But anyway, yes. Wow.
Anyway, they say it's a text or a thumbnail link designed to attract attention and entice users to follow, read, listen, view to a linked piece of content. And it's often deceptive, sensational, misleading, very titillating sometimes. It's a teaser. It's, the headline to catch you. And headlines in particular can be sort of dishonest and not accurately reflecting the content being delivered. I will say this is not new. This is not just an internet phenomenon. If you go back, the tabloids have been doing it for centuries, and newspapers,
and there was no clicking there. It was a grab.
It was just bait. It was
read all about it.
Right? Come buy our newspaper, and you'd have every once in a while you would see the New York Times would do, the top half of the page was one headline. Usually it was really news. The war is over or something like that, but that was designed to do the same thing, get you to buy the paper and read the thing. And nowadays we live in an even shorter attention span kind of a world where you got to grab that reader as they're scrolling, or you don't make your impression. And
how do you, I want to jump right into how you feel about podcasting, how it does it, because that's the area that you both see the most. Do you see a lot of we all have the podcast we go to over and over again. Do you think there's been any motion towards that same thing? I don't see it as much, but there's not as much trailer capability in the average podcast setup. There is some trailer capability where you can pull that off, and obviously there's titles and descriptions. Do you see the industry move that way, when more so with searchability, because that is kind of like the golden phrase still is searchability?
I think it's, I'm not sure podcasting does too much clickbaiting. I have seen some headlines that are, I can't say misleading in a negative way. I'm just saying they say, the title is let's pretend, I don't know, top 10 things you should never do in podcasting. Let's pretend, right? And then I go ahead and I click through and I want to listen to that episode, and it ends up being a conversation that doesn't give me the 10 things. And then I'm like, well, that was a waste of my time. But to your point,
or 3 of them are selling you a product, right?
Yeah, exactly. But Trevor, one thing that I've seen that is different is that whenever you get that through online, I can quickly scan and see whatever that clickbaity thing was. Whereas with a podcast, it's really hard to get that. You have to listen. It's just not a fast thing. You can't fast listen to a podcast. I've been in a place in the past where I wanted to get that one bit of information that they did put in their title. And then I'll put it at 2.5 to speed. And I'm just holding on for dear life, trying to listen when they're going to talk about that one thing that I want to hear. And then I stop it. And then I actually go okay, this is the chunk. Okay, they're talking about it now. And there's times when they never actually talk specifically about what I want to hear. So that to me is a sort of a clickbaity thing in podcasting, but I don't feel it's podcasting news on the other hand.
I was going to say in the newsletters, and also sometimes just when you've subscribed to the particular podcast's email newsletter and they send out this week's episode, and they'll sensationalize in the headline before just so you open the email and read it, and then hopefully click through and listen to the episode. But podcast, long form content, I think you're less likely to experience that kind of thing.
That prompted a related question to this question of transparency and deception. And I don't know if this question is going to come out the right way, but I wanted to get your thoughts, because as you were talking and we were considering the podcast role in it, then it occurred to me that I wonder if podcasting has a higher burden, because there is almost a higher burden on the text than there would be in, say, a video, where maybe you could get a trailer. But where do you see the greatest burden in terms of holding that industry accountable? Which media form do you see doing the best job at it now? And which media form would you like to see doing better at it? Like, TV is probably as corrupt as it can come. And I only say that because they've been doing it the longest. Like maybe radio, I don't know. I don't hear as much about it, but TV is probably the one that I think of as most traditional. Internet's the one I trust the least. But where do you see the balance, and where do you want it to be?
I think we can all do better. That's bottom line. I think we're more used to viewing the television and, to a certain extent, radio with a little bit of a skeptical eye. We expect to be a little tricked in those kinds of things. I think we're getting there with internet stuff too, especially with emails. You see those sensational headlines in your subject lines on your email, and I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm pretty quick to scroll past things unless it's from somebody I know or respect or something like that. But I think YouTube is where you still see a lot of, video generally, you see a lot of it. And that's because we're visual people. We're attracted to bright colors, shiny objects, sexy imagery, and a facial expression that looks surprised. That's going to get people's attention. And
Yeah, I think
instinctive.
absolutely. I believe that clickbait itself, I'm not sure it's by its own, on its own sake, is inherently bad or negative. I think where our responsibility lies is in where the landing is, right? So there's the bait, and you get people in, and then once you get them in, if you can offer something of value that is really meaningful, whatever that might be, in whether it's entertaining, whether it's informational, whether it's whatever, like an easier process, selling a product that truly is an amazing product, then I do believe that the bait in that is merited, right? We need to get, like, you got to do what you got to do to really bring value to the world if you truly believe in your product. I think where we falter, is in the creation of the bait only as something valuable, and then when they get to the content, it's like, really? This?
Yeah. I think you're onto something there. There's the whole idea of, I think it was Zig Ziglar or Jim Rohn said, selling is serving. And Rohn, I know, is the one who said, look, if you have a product that can help people, you have an obligation, a duty to get out there and offer it to them. But if you can't get them to pay attention to your offer long enough to know what's available, then you're not serving. So if the clickbait, or let's call it the sensational headline, is leading people to value, as you said, Elsie, I think that then is part of the serving by selling. If it's just, hey, and where clickbait I think really happens a lot is on the web pages where you read an article that's interesting to you, and then you're scrolling down and say, look what so-and-so had such and such, and this picture of Pam Anderson and some crazy headline. And so you click on that, and it just takes you to a page where oftentimes it's like a slideshow where you have to click each different image, and then all they're doing is putting ads on those pages and charging money. So it's just about, churning the ad accounts, I guess you could say. That's where I think it's disreputable.
Yeah, you make it interesting. There's so many layers to that, and it's like, maybe it's not even the website, maybe it's the advertisers, because if the advertisements are what's the clickbait, the article or the ads in the article? There's just so many of them more on the nose. I think, examples, and we talked earlier in the week, but with social media and how we represent ourselves in social media, and even the photo manipulation that happens a lot within the advertising industry that then leads people to want to do that on their own feeds and with their own brands, that then leads to these very image focused discussions that then leads to libel and slander, because now we're focused on someone's brand as a personal thing and we're taking shots. Like it's a very quick slide with some of those discussions in social media, because social media doesn't have that static nature like some of the more traditional news sources and more traditional media sources, I think. Where in the social branding piece do you see the most, I guess, hurtful to a more broad, like, ethical and societal view on it? Because I think that that's going to go hand in hand with the legal things that you want to talk about, Gordon. But where are we seeing it most? I mean, I think of Instagram having the most filters, but that's only because I don't spend very much time anywhere else. Where are you seeing the most hurtful sort of misrepresentations and maybe clickbait based things when it comes to body image? Because I think that that's a really scary topic to take on. But I think it's a really important one when we talk about misrepresentation of what real life is.
I think the fashion magazine industry is where we can point to as sort of originating some of these issues with the Photoshop of the cover. You got the model who's already super skinny, but they make her even thinner on the cover, or, you know, or just eliminate those, what we would call imperfections, which I would actually argue are what make people different. That's the perfections. But women generally, people generally look at these fashion magazines and hold themselves up to that false ideal. I think that happens on Instagram. I think Instagram, I don't know what's happening with that platform right now, but it's definitely not where it once was. But TikTok, you see a lot of should everybody be able to do those shuffle dances and things like that? Should everybody have the body of that bikini model type girl who is doing the dance, or showing off her dessert on the plate or whatever else? This influencer culture that we're in now does a lot of that same thing, holds up these either false or just really sort of impossible ideals. And especially young people. I mean, there's a reason we try to limit kids from using these tools, because those washboard abs, I don't wish that hard that I'm actually going to do anything about it. But there you go.
Yeah, I think the commodity, I can't even say it. The way that people are making the commodity of being able to get lots of likes and comments and engagement in these things, I feel is something that some generations possibly look as a form of value, as in, oh, look, that picture got X amount of likes ever, and therefore that is what I want to strive to do. And whenever you start to look to be able to rethink locked up, she was able to circumvent every single security measure that somebody who's very well versed in the tech sphere was set for her. She opened up a TikTok account. She started doing a TikTok thingy. I caught her doing it. She had over 4 million followers. Like, it was crazy, where I was like, what is happening right now? She goes, Mom, look at this. And I was like, what is happening? And she goes, and of course I was like, I cannot, anyway, there's so much to that, but I was like, I gotta, no, this is, no. So she got in big trouble. But
that's what, I mean, respectfully, podcasting, YouTubing, it is all a very self-image driven industry. Media and entertainment is a very self-image driven industry, and that's bled over, not surprisingly, into the social media, and with money and with clicks and advertising engagement. All that stuff drives like some pretty wild That's 4 million though. Holy crud.
Yeah, that's amazing.
It's amazing. Yeah, within like
she's gonna be a great influencer.
She was able to do that so fast. And I was astounded. And first of all, like there was just so much about
an
that.
online course.
Yeah.
How I got 4 million influencers in 2 weeks.
I know.
Headline.
There's a headline. Oh my God. But it was just very interesting to me to see that the initial attachment to that was, for me as a content creator, my content leads the way. So I'm very careful about what I put online. I'm very, like, I curate my I'm very mindful about that. And as a creator, as somebody who's been working in the arts for a while, somebody who was behind the, as an actor for a while. So I kind of want to put the content, to me, leads the way. Whereas for her, it was the engagement piece, right? It was my friends, they're going to miss me, like the value exchange between the creation of something and her understanding of how she was adding value to something was not that line. That was not bridged. That bridge was not there. And there wasn't an understanding of content creation as part of the piece. It was just the social part. And that's when I thought, that's really intriguing to me about how our small minds can get, it's deceptive to them to be seen and to be heard and to be acknowledged for something. And mind you, this happened during the pandemic as well, right? When the kids were disconnected from
it was their only way to connect with their friends.
It was the only way. Yeah. And so then I can see all of those things, but also I do see that, kids are smart.
Yeah.
And there's nothing out there at this time that can stop a child from doing what they want, because they'll find a way to do it. And so it's like whatever those, to me, in terms of the clickbait stuff, it's, again, going back to it, the images that we put in front of them are communicating the majority of the information. And it behooves us to recognize the responsibility of those articles or whatever that image is, to influence a little brain that doesn't know what to do just yet.
Yeah, I think, parenting in the internet age is actually maybe a topic we ought to take on and bring a guest and those kinds of things.
Yeah.
There's a lot to unpack here, but I was really interested. We had a statistic on the screen a second ago saying 70% of teens say they trust influencers. So they are not skeptics. They are not trained with that inherent mistrust of what they, just because you see it on the internet doesn't mean it's true. Just because you read it somewhere doesn't mean it's true. I think we're not doing a great job of educating our kids about media and this kind of stuff. And part of it is it's just happening so fast that by the time you develop a curriculum, it's going to feel like old news to the kids when you tell them what you see on Facebook. I don't use Facebook. I use those kind of things. So, but I think we have to do better on that arena. And, the question in the chat, influencers have become such a large part of our culture. How do you ensure that your kids are following healthy people? The only answer I can think of is we have to talk with them about it. We have to look at what they're looking at and also show them what we're looking at. Well, let's not get crazy. Our feeds will be full of stuff we really care very little about.
Yeah.
But sitting down with the kids and saying, hey, what have you been looking at this week? What's going on? Who are you following? I know some of the ones that my kids follow, and I think it's pretty wholesome, but I don't know. Are they not telling me about the ones that aren't? There's that too. And I've got, my kids range from 10 to 15. So, they're different levels, but the 10-year-old is seeing what the 15-year-old's looking at because they share a bedroom, So, there's just, fortunately, I think my kids are all pretty wholesome kids. And now that I say that, of course, tomorrow I'll find out something shocking and devastating. But but exactly right. So in the chat, ask why they follow who they follow. Exactly. What are you watching? Why do you follow it? What does it give you? And do you ever see something that just doesn't seem right? Doesn't seem true? Let's break down some of these posts and look at it. And I think that we as at least those of us that are media savvy parents ought to be doing more of that. And we ought to be helping everybody, other parents who aren't as media savvy, and also kids, educators everywhere. We ought to be aiming for just much higher level of media literacy across the board.
Mm-hmm. And I think that,
Yeah.
to follow up on that, Gordon, that it really starts with us first, because we cannot teach or even guide if we don't really have an idea of what it all is anyway.
Yeah.
And also, I would venture to say, what are your trigger points? Meaning, like, let's say I am looking at something. When I personally look at something, go, make me feel inadequate, make me feel like I'm missing out? When do I feel like I should be doing better? When do I click through? Because I can better teach by modeling and by recognizing when I am having that sort of a reaction. That's something that we often talk in this household. It is that kind of a thing where I will say, like, oh my gosh, I fell for this, or look at this, I thought it was this, and now this is it. And so it's not about mom knows all the things. I'm just able to say to them, hey, I had this experience because I did this, this, and this. I just want you to be aware that this is a thing. Okay. So yeah.
Yeah. And being in that position to say, look, even grown-ups, even people who you respect or should respect, and your teachers, your family members, they sometimes fall for these tricks. And being open about it when you do fall for it is a way of showing kids, here are some things to be mindful about and aware of. And really, I think it makes sense to start talking and teaching, or just having a bigger conversation about the nature of marketing and the nature of how money plays into these things. I remember the moment in my life, I think I was in high school, when it really became clear to me that if you look at any particular message you get and you ask, well, where's the money coming from to make this, and why is there a motivation to even put it out there, that once you start being aware of that, it changes how you look at everything. And that's, kids don't have that sense yet. So, and a lot of adults don't, to be really honest. So let's talk about, marketing and deception and trade practices and things like that.
Yeah, and the antidote. I mean, the antidote, there's multiple possible angles for any essential remedies or potential remedies, but I know what's going on in the Supreme Court is one of those things that potentially could have some impact, and I would love to hear a little bit about that. And then I just can't say thank you enough. I was once a kid and now I'm an adult, and just as a human, to both of you as parents, thank you for having that perspective, because I don't have kids myself, but I think about what it would be like to go through those motions, and also what it means for the world every time there's kids. Like, it's easy to look down on the future generations and write off everything they do. But to engage with them, I think, is a really smart and probably the only right answer. We live in a world where people want a black and white solution. They want a pill to take. And with this type of conversation, it's a conversation, it seems like. And I love that that's how both of you are presenting the main antidote for the kids, is to talk with them, have a relationship with them.
Yeah. I mean, the world has changed. When I was a kid, it was very easy for the institutions to filter and separate. Okay, Saturday morning, we know kids are watching TV, so we'll put on kids-oriented programming. And then even then, the government had to make rules about what kind of advertising they could run and those kinds of things. But then there was the time of day when we knew it was going to be adults, and and that's still to a certain extent the case because kids are at school. And then there was the time of day in the evening when you'd have some of the sort of family-friendly television sitcoms and things. And the more grown-up themes didn't happen till later at night. And then we got cable television, and then we got satellite television, and now we have streaming, and the stuff is all available all the time, and in your hand on your phone when your kid is riding the bus or going to the mall. Who knows what they're watching? It's just a different world. And so I won't say more dangerous place, but we need to be more responsible as the families to be tuned into what's going on and steering our kids in the right direction, because they will follow what we model. If we're watching the titillating stuff and falling for the tricks, they will too, until we start really talking about why they shouldn't or what they should. And by the way, it isn't right. I don't think you say to a kid, I don't want you watching that, and just leave it there. I think you need to explain why. I think it's important for kids to understand, mom and dad don't like me watching this because XYZ.
Right.
And that's what plants the ideas of, okay, thinking about more. Anyway, so.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I want to talk about what we do when parents don't have that, or when kids don't have those resources, or when somebody didn't have that education growing up. What are we as industry leaders, as business people, and as the government oversight with that 230? What are the implications of that? And then also, I want to know, what are we doing and what should we be doing as an industry to protect them? Because we can't be parents. We can't force parents. We can't train parents. That's been a discussion for all of eternity, that the level of education that a parent has a direct impact, and mentorship and access to resources, all of those things have a direct impact on how they can help their kiddos.
Right.
And not every parent's equipped to do that. So what are we doing as leaders, and hopefully both in politics and in business, to ensure that we're overseeing those things? What are you seeing out there? We've talked about like basically a bullshit meter. That's not what we called it, but like a transparency meter would be super great. I don't know who regulates that, but what is on the radar that you all are seeing out there?
You want to go, Elsie, or you want me to?
You can go, because this is a broad conversation, a broad topic.
Yeah, I want to hit 230 for sure, because I know that that's something heavy on your mind, and also it's a moving and fluid topic before we miss it.
Yeah, but I think this is actually a really interesting segue into this, because we're talking about regulating and what should the rules be and so on. And, you know, as we've been saying, the first step of regulation or rulemaking really is at the family level, the parents. We need to teach kids to set their boundaries and make their rules for themselves. But I think the last thing most of us content creators want is government or any authority coming in and telling us, here's what you can do, here's what you can't do. If you do this, you're in trouble, you know, those kinds of things. And the Section 230 and the cases that we'll talk about in a second are part of that. But historically, media, meaning the television and radio folks, they have, you know, look, the film industry has a rating system that is not government mandated, but it's only exists because government started to threaten like they might create some mandates. And so the industry came together and self-regulated by creating this rating system. Same is true with television and radio. There are some restrictions on what can be broadcast at certain times and so on. But generally speaking, the networks and the producers of content have been wary of being regulated by the government, so they do it for themselves. We, as the internet, as the creative community in this day and age, with content and communication being so easy for us to do, I think it's going to be incumbent on us to develop some guidelines and practices and so on. And we put a link on the screen to Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. And I got to say that is an interesting link. It is a link to the United States Justice Department, the Biden administration's particular perspective on Section 230, with which I am not sure we want to agree.
So I will get a different one.
Food for thought. The Wikipedia article on Section 230 is actually very good. But let's just start talking about what is Section 230. It's a section of the Communications Decency Act of 1996. So there we had government stepping in, trying to regulate communications and what's allowed and what's not. And they had a lot of stuff in Section 230 about pornography and children's pornography especially. And there were a bunch of lawsuits that invalidated much of that law not too many years later. But Section 230, the courts have said, look, this one can sit by itself, so it stays valid. What it says, basically, I'll read you the text of it. The Section 230 C1 says, no provider or user of an interactive computer service shall be treated as the publisher or speaker of any information provided by another information content provider. So that means that the Facebooks, the YouTubes, the Twitters, this 1996, this made these businesses safe from lots of lawsuits and liability. And that allowed for the internet to grow up and become the robust communications form that it is. And it made it possible for Facebook and Twitter and YouTube and LinkedIn and Twitch and TikTok now and all these to operate without the big concern of the worry of people coming at them and suing them for one thing or another. This because there had been some lawsuits prior to that, prior to 96, holding. One was against CompuServe, and it said they're not liable, and one was against AOL, and it said they were, and there was one against Prodigy, and they were, so it was this whole mix of things. So a couple of congressmen got together, bipartisan action, came up with this approach. So, and it gives them the power and the right. The reason this was in the news the last few years was it gave these providers the opportunity and the ability to moderate content without looking like the publisher, and therefore take down a user, that deplatform people who were abusing the system, those kinds of things. So the cases that were in the news this week, the Supreme Court on Tuesday this week, they heard one case, and on Wednesday they heard another one. The Tuesday case was called Gonzalez versus Google, and it involved the family of a woman who was killed in a terrorist act in Paris. She's a California girl. She was studying abroad in Paris. She was one of 130 people killed in this terrorist act. And it later came out that the actors of this terrorist conduct had been watching YouTube videos, and YouTube was recommending, here's what's next here. If you like that, you'll like this, and those kinds of things. ISIS videos, one after another, and that was what radicalized and indoctrinated these terrorists. And so the Gonzalez family's position is YouTube is responsible for making these people into what they became and what they did. YouTube comes in and says, no, Section 230, we can't be held liable for the stuff that our users post. We're not the publisher of that. We are more like a bookstore or a library. We don't hold bookstores or libraries liable for the content of the books on the shelves. Gonzalez family and a few other people, including the Biden administration and Senator Josh Hawley, came out with the view that no, you're the ones doing the recommending. You are now making that speech your own in the course of doing it. Now, of course, we know it's an algorithm that's doing this. And so the question is, by creating that algorithm, did YouTube expose themselves to liability? What's interesting is the Supreme Court in the oral arguments, if you listen, there was a very mixed reaction. You sort of expect nowadays a sort of partisan or party lines kind of things. Not so. Both, Elena Kagan on the one hand saying, hey, we shouldn't be deciding how the internet works. We're not the experts. And then Justice Thomas saying, no, I don't think their recommendations are anything more than suggestions. And Kavanaugh said something like he was worried about it blowing up how the internet works and things. So there's a lot of skepticism of this Gonzalez argument. Where everybody's watching this very carefully, because if the court says no, we're going to limit Section 230, it's going to change the way these systems that we're used to using operate. And it may also force the providers to censor material more and be more aggressive in the moderation and so on. And I'm not sure that's what we want. So again, this is where we should self-regulate as much as it makes sense, so that we don't end up having Congress having to step in. If Congress doesn't like the outcome of this case, that's another concern. They will come in and maybe do tweaking to Section 230. And there's an argument to be said that maybe it's time for some of that, but this has everybody in an uproar. The other case I mentioned went the other way. The case is called Twitter versus Tamna versus Twitter. And the argument was that Twitter was in violation of the Anti-Terrorism Act by allowing terrorists to use Twitter to communicate about their plans and whatever. And Twitter raised the same thing. Hey, it's Section 230. We couldn't have known. This isn't our responsibility, and so on. And the jury and the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals in that case found against Twitter. They said, no, you were aiding and abetting the acts of terrorism. So we have these two competing cases that the way the Supreme Court goes on one will sort of be the opposite for the other. And it's going to change things. We've got to be watching what's going on here.
Certainly, potentially, yeah. That's it seems like a big deal to have that switch to put some responsibility on the companies, because it hasn't been that in other things. Elsie, I know you work in the industry of the distribution. Any thoughts on how companies are held responsible when they are kind of the host of a content? Not to put you on the spot in that way, but it is an interesting question of who is responsible in that mix.
I think part of the larger discussion here is, and I'm gonna veer, I'm gonna wrap this up like a politician. I think that something that we need to as folks that are consuming content online, creating content online, promoting content online, I'm going to say the same thing I just said earlier when it comes to being a parent. We have to, number one, step into discussions and learn in the same way that Gordon was laying it all out for us here. Like, Gordon is one source of information, an expert in this space that spent some time at this week and longer than that trying to convey what this is to a lot of lay people, especially students, right? So you think about it from that perspective. There are podcasts out there that are also covering this space. There's tons of articles out there that are covering this space. You know what happens when you read those things? You get super bored. You don't want to know about what the heck is happening. This is too complicated. I'm just going to go away. And we are not in that position anymore. We need to take responsibility to continue to educate ourselves about these issues, because they are going to impact, if not only our work as podcasters, our children in all parts of the world, including possibly the companies that they get hired with or around or support, because we all have a stake in it. The other aspect of it is that it doesn't just affect, mind you, I do not want to take away from the conversation around impact that these algorithms have, particularly for communities that are either underrepresented or often completely dismissed and are harmed always first. I recognize that, and I'm going to put it right in this area here. So I get that. The other aspect of it is that any kind of deliberation of things like this is going to impact the entire industry, like everything that you are. So you have to understand that the impact could be, as in, the company closes. They can no longer do their business. They can't afford. So there's all of these other things. They can't afford to have the infrastructure that requires doing whatever Congress has stipulated or the law says. They are now have to switch resources to different places. They're going to raise prices because they need to cover those costs. There's going to be complete algorithm changes that is going to, in some way affect your bottom line as a creator. So let's say you're making X amount of, months, money a month. Now you don't have that anymore. It's not going to be happening. So we have to really recognize it from a lot of different perspectives and be well versed in being able to see where you stand. And to add to that mix, that it's not just the United States, right? So the U.S. this is a United States thing. This is happening here in the U.S. The world does not have a Section 230.
Correct.
The U.S. has Section 230. Now, so the Digital Services Act is happening, and that is in Europe, and that could possibly affect everything prior to even the Section 230 and the Twitter and what was the name? The Twitter Tamne, whatever. That's all happening in June. So is the thing that's happening in Europe, which the Digital Services Act is happening as well. Regardless of what happens, we're going to have to adjust, and we all have to be open to being able to solve it together.
Yeah, that was amazing. I mean, that was great, Elsie. All of it. That was an Elsie talk.
Speechless.
That was,
oh my God.
It was so spot on. I just wanted to take a second and appreciate how amazing and how great it is to get to work in an industry where that is the leadership that we get to follow, is like that kind of fire for that thing.
Yeah.
And it puts a lot of responsibility back on the business community, on the industry that leads us, whatever that industry is, whether it is YouTube or media more broadly, or specifically podcasting in some cases. It puts a lot of pressure. And I think that that's a great place for it to be, because those are the people making the big P word off of it. So if the companies making all the profits can help lead us in those ways, so we don't have to have the government step in. You convinced me. I want to, like, I don't know if I was on the side that businesses should take care of kids and that parents can cover it, but you convinced me. And that piece about the world market being such a big part of it was really, really extremely well said. And I appreciate you bringing that perspective, and not only bringing that perspective, but emphasizing how important it is to have that national, beyond the national borders perspective, because a creator community is so much bigger than that. That is one of the beauties of the internet, along with all these other cool questions that keep us up at night about our kids.
Just to clarify, Section 230 is one of the reasons that so many of these companies are U.S. based, is because there's this sort of safe harbor. And I haven't really looked very much at the Digital Services Act. I kind of knew it was out there, but I'm sort of interested to see what approach the EU wants to take at this, because they've done some things pretty differently in the past with respect to privacy. You all remember GDPR coming into effect, and everybody having to reauthorize email addresses and the what is it called, the cookie click thing that you have to do when you join a new website nowadays, and all that. That's a result of Europe doing its thing and making its rules. But the big companies, the Googles of the world, are going to have to comply in Europe as well, if they want users to have access to their services over there. So we are in a global marketplace now, and the restrictions of the most strict of the big countries are the ones that will affect us all, I think. So
absolutely. Yeah. And I don't want to also, whenever any part of the world passes something, just like you're saying, in terms of being strict, or and still holding a pretty substantial amount of power, it's going to affect the world, right? So it's not just going to be like, we're just going to stick right here. It's like, that's not going to, as we know, with all of the GDPR stuff, it affected everything and everyone.
Yeah.
And it continues to do that. And it continues to be constant, because the other thing is, if something is passed or whatever that is, then it has to be enforced. And that's where we are now in terms of the enforcement of it, especially with the enforcement of calling the big players to the task. I think, I don't know how many times Google's being sued in the EU for infractions into, all of the stuff that was happening over there. So that's part of the deal as well, that it's not just now you can't do it. It's like, where's the enforcement? We're going to enforce it, and then we're going to call people to task. And that also takes a lot of resources, and it takes time. So it's not like we're going to turn on a light switch and the world is going to change. It'll slowly start to have those repercussions, and you're going to have to ask deeper questions all the way around.
Totally agree.
Completely agree. I want to move towards the end. I could talk about this with you all day, and I think that this topic is so big that it almost warrants an entire show dedicated to it for season after season, because it's such an evolving conversation. And so I think that we have some things to chew on. So Bree and I were back and forthing on next week's topic, just to be totally transparent with you. And I think we might need a moment to relax on it after this episode, to decide if we want to shift into something different, or if we want to continue a different part of this discussion, because it is so important and so broad reaching, and social media has just completely knock down the boundaries on how we understand how these things affect us, because social media gets into so many different crevices of our life in different ways. Like Elsie, you were saying, like, there's no regulation for that type of stuff with your daughter. How do you do it? There is so much potentially in this topic. So if it's okay with the two of you, I would love to deep breath it as we relax on this episode, maybe over the next couple of days, decide on next week. Are you okay with that? Or do you have a thought for next week already?
I think, we'll put our heads together like we do, next week and figure something out. But I just say we barely scratched the surface of some of the stuff we meant to talk about today. We were going to talk about influencers and
the influencer
the
part,
disclosure requirements and
all of that stuff.
false
We still
deceptive
need to
advertising.
totally all of that stuff. I think that we can move it into that too, though. I do feel we need to talk about that stuff, the influencer stuff and the disclosures for us as creators. I think that's something we need to address.
Yeah. So we'll put that on the roadmap for some time in the next few weeks, probably something like that. But yeah, maybe we do need to take a breath and let this breathe a little bit before we move on and come back to some of these topics.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's just it's such a deep well of conversation because it's gone a while without a whole lot of attention. And as always, I want to just shower both of you, Elsie and Gordon, in gratitude and appreciation for leading us to a point with the industries that you've had an impact on since day one, which is podcasting, and being a source of light, I believe, for the media industry. And now being willing to have these conversations more broadly, I think is a huge deal. And I respect each of you as professionals so much. And I know that so many people look up to you in terms of the industry. The industry looks to what you're saying, and your words are important. And so to get to share this space with you each week for 3 weeks now is such a freaking honor. To get to hear your hot takes on things and how it's impacting your kids and your lives. It's so much deeper than just a conversation about the legal aspects of it. It really is like the fuzzy stuff. It really is the stuff in between the black and white, between the rules. It's how do we operate between the rules? Was a lot of what we originally thought, and I think we are fulfilling that mission, and I'm just so grateful to each of you for doing that. We will get some promotional materials out over the weekend and into early next week that tells us what next week's episode will be, but what I can guarantee you is that it will be the same time, same place. It will be Friday at 8 a.m. with Fuzzy Lawgic, with Elsie Escobar, with myself, Trevor, and with Gordon. We'll be back. We have Bree in the background, who is running not only great graphics, not only keeping the comments lively, but also is creating phenomenal stuff behind the scenes in terms of promotional materials and getting her production list together. So big shout out to Bree for doing that. Shout out to Gordon. What is the name of your legal course? Quick shout out to the legal course.
The course is called Easy Legal for Podcasters, but coming up in March, I'm going to be doing a live free workshop called Business and Legal Fundamentals for Podcast Growth and Success. And you can go to event.podcastlaw.net if you're interested, or scan the screen and get that QR code.
Scan the screen.
Scan the screen. Of course, I'll be speaking at the upcoming conferences, Podcast Movements Evolutions and Podfest Global, which is a virtual. That's going to be fun. And lots of good stuff coming up. And Bree, Bree, Elsie, you've got She Podcasts, and you've got the Bloom. What's it called?
The Sonic Bloom Awards. I know. I got the Bloom, man. I got Sonic Bloom Awards. You can apply for this awards that's going to be presented over at She Podcast Live in June. So you need to get your tickets.
Where is She Podcast Live being held this year?
It is in Washington, D.C.
Awesome. Great. All right.
Yes.
Terrific. Somebody scanned the code. It was me. It really does work. If you scan the code, if you scan the code, it tells you. It's so validating. So I scanned the code.
Oh my God. Somebody scanned the code.
Our friends, they like us. They'll miss us.
I know. Somebody scanned the code.
Hold on, everybody, just quickly grab a quick pat on the back. No, today was a great episode, another great time. We will see everyone next week, 8 a.m. for Fuzzy Lawgic. In the meantime, have a great week. And Bree, we are ready when you are to roll that ending clip.